All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Tyler Cunningham. I'm a programming research facilitator for the Near North Mobile Media Lab, and I also work for Digital Creator Online. And today I'll be giving a workshop, the first of two, on Hydra, which is a live code software that lets us create our own experimental visuals. So I'm just going to share my screen. So Hydra was made by someone named Olivia Jack, who is a visual artist. And they basically created this really cool visual synthesizer that's super accessible. You can access it on any internet browser, and you can also access it on tablets, smartphones, and of course, computers. Um, and basically, it allows you to create these really remarkable visuals in real time. And it's actually not so difficult to use. And so it's a really powerful tool. It can be audio reactive. You can change a ton of parameters. It sort of encourages experimentation. And so that's why I'm really excited to teach it to you today. So there's a couple things we'll do today to sort of start. We'll start with some of the basics. I'll first sort of go through some examples to show you what it's actually capable of. And then I'll show you how to sort of enter code, how to do code. And then what we'll do is we'll actually start getting into coding, and I'll talk about different sources you can use, how to manipulate color, sort of basic color, and then I'll also show you some basic geometry. And the next time we'll talk more about modulation, audio reaction, and some more advanced ways to manipulate color and geometry. All right. So first, we're just going to go through some examples. What's really great about Hydra is as soon as you log on, you're brought to sort of a couple of examples that you can go through. And you'll see sort of up here that you can sort of cycle through, you can get some random code to work with, which is really a great way to learn and see what others do and what's even possible on the platform. So, for example, here's another, and everyone's credited up here with either a handle, website, or their name. And so you can see here, and you like really they're using the exact same things over and over, like shape. You can see shape, you can see color, scroll. So really you only need a couple of these to really make remarkable formations. Here's another. They use sort of these different layers to create these really amazing effects. Here's another. It's a little darker. And actually this one, if you can see, is responding to my voice. And so you could see right here, they actually have some audio reactive functions inside of it. And I'll show you how to do a bit of that next time. Another example. And then the other thing you can do is you have some code up, you can make a random change. So if I click this, it's making random changes in the code for me. And this is a really fun tool if you just don't really know what to do next, because now it's just doing some random changes. Like here, it's changing color, it's changing the geometry of it and the sort of formations. So very powerful, basically. There's a lot you can do. And then here you can upload it to a gallery if you click it. And then here you sort of can ask for help. It'll bring you to documentation. All right, but let's get started for ourselves because that is the point of today. So I'm gonna scrap this. We're gonna sort of start anew here. You'll be brought to this blank page that says type some code on a new line and press Control-Shift-Enter. So first, let's just talk about how to enter code. So say I have some code and we'll learn sort of what this means in a bit. So say we have that. How you enter code, you could simply just do Control Enter. So Control Enter, I have entered it, and it is appearing on the page. And actually, let's make this. Let's make this a little. There we go. Let's actually put some color in there. We'll learn about how to do that. But basically, so Control Enter is the simplest way to do it, and that just sends a line of code. So just a line. So when every time I press Control Enter, wherever my cursor is, it sends that line. Now, say I was on two different lines like that, and I had, two different parts of the code like this. I'll have it repeat. Now, if I just send the line, it won't work because it's just sending the line. It's not sending this whole block. And so if you have a block like this where it's on two separate lines, you need to do Alt Enter. And so you see when I press Alt Enter, then it puts the whole code out there. Okay. Now say there'll be a situation, and we will talk about that either today or next time. We can do something called we can actually use our webcam. And so the code for that is S0 and it's cam. And then you do this thing called source, or actually let's do our screen just because it's sort of easier to show you. So we'll do that, and then something like that. So, okay, if I were to do Control-Shift-Enter, which again is all of the code. So Control-Shift-Enter is all of the code on screen, okay? So in this case, we would want to do that because they're not really a block. There's sort of space in between. So these are two separate blocks and two separate lines, if that makes sense. Okay. So if I were to do all of the code on the screen and do Control-Shift-Enter, then it would ask me to share my screen like this. Okay. So I'm going to do that. And now, as you can see, it's sort of sending it to this video to the Hydra system. It's very, very cool. But I don't want to send the entire code anymore. Why not? Because if I send this again, then I'll be sharing twice. And trust me, when Hydra gets that code twice, it sort of messes things up a little bit. So you don't want to send this again. So in a case like this, or when you're sort of initiating webcam, you don't want to send all the code again. In fact, you just want to send the code. So if I were to do something like, I don't know, repeat 22, I just want to send this, right? So I could either use Control Enter or Alt Enter. So when I do Alt Enter, it doesn't prompt me to share my screen again. It just does the code down here, all right? Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to scrap that. Some other things to know before we start. Say, I don't know, I have a bunch of code, it's messy, I don't know, I have a ton of stuff going on, like so, and eventually, if I keep going forever, this will get pretty messy. So this is sort of what I have right now. And oh, I need to get my charger, so give me a moment. All right. All right, sorry about that. Okay, so I have a bunch of code. Eventually, these things get really, really quite messy. One thing that I can do is I could do Control Shift F, and that actually formats it in a nicer way. So actually here it's actually not changing anything because I only have one line, but here, let me try to find something more messy. So, okay, this one's a little more messy. If I do Control Shift F here, it makes it, it just formats it in a lot nicer. See how all the dots now are lined up. Okay, so that's just an example of that. And then the last thing I can do, oh, I should have shown this in the last one, but if I wanted to hide my code, say you're performing, you want to hide the code, you can do Control Shift H. And Control Shift H brings all the code off. And if you press Control Shift H again, then you can bring it back on. All right, and that's what you need to know for now. You can also launch code with this play button up here. So I'm going to trash that. Let's learn some code. So I actually will sort of post this wherever this workshop is posted because I find this extremely helpful, the Hydra functions. Everything in Hydra except for some of the more complex arithmetic stuff is here. All here, it's all you need. So you can really do sort of crazy, amazing, infinite number of things just with these. So we're gonna sort of go in order. I have my sort of own list, so it's not gonna be the exact order. But let's start with solid. Solid is probably the easiest one to start out with. It makes the most sense. So there's a sort of order of things when you do the code. So, for example, with solid, you'll say you want just one color. You'll sort of know, okay, I need to use solid. I need to use the word solid because I want just one color. And then whenever you type solid, the things that come after, well, first of all, they're called arguments. And there's always a specific order that the arguments go in, and each one is different. So the sort of annoying thing about this is, yes, you have to know what each one does, but when you also need to know what each thing has in its arguments. So for example, solid has different arguments than shape. Shape, you need to have to know that the first thing is side, second thing is radius, and the third thing is smoothing. And for solid, it's actually completely different because since solid is just one color, all you need to know is the RGB values, right? And for those of you who don't know, color on digital computers have an RGB and then also an A value. And basically what it means is since computers have red pixels, green pixels, and blue pixels, they sort of use a combination of red, green, and blue to sort of create any color, as well as the alpha value. But we won't really talk about alpha today. So let's sort of put that in. So say I want just red, right? So RGB, so I'll want all red, right? And just remember, anything more than one doesn't really matter because these values are sort of on a range from 0 to 1. So I want to put 1 in the red column or in the red part. The next is green. I don't want any green because I just want red. And the next is blue, and I don't want any blue either because I just want red. So I'll put 1, 0 there too. And then you could put 1 in the alpha value, but I just tend to ignore it. So you really shouldn't have to worry about that. It should make things more complex. And then you should also know that if I were to just enter this, it won't send anything because it hasn't been told to put anything out. So at the end of your code, you will always put dot out and then these parentheses, okay? And we'll talk about why in a bit. But if you run that code, you see you get completely red, right? And then if I did green, you'll see completely green and then blue, right? And then you could do sort of a combination, get different colors. So if I did 0.5 here and here, you get sort of these combinations, 0.1. Well, that didn't really do much, but if I do... So you can sort of play around and get a bunch of different colors here. Okay, so that's the first one, is solid. We'll sort of leave the out stuff here for now because you always need this, but we'll sort of take that source out for now. Next we'll do is gradients. Gradients this. So gradient is a little simpler. Basically, all it asks for is a speed. Speed is the only argument for gradients, okay? Because it shows all colors. It doesn't really need any information about color, right? Because it's its own thing. So we have gradients in here. It asks for speed, so let's just put 1 for now to see what that looks like. So you see it's sort of slowly changing color in, of course, a gradient. And if I change it to a faster speed, I of course get a faster gradient. Slower speed, this will be much slower. Yeah. So that's the second source. And remember, these are sources. So these are things that sort of are objects to get you started. They're not really modifiers. They're just things in themselves. Colors and sort of changing shapes and geometry, those have to do with sort of changing elements. But for now, these are just sources. So let's take gradient off. The next we're going to do is sort of a part of a couple that are a little bit more complicated. So next we'll do shape, okay? So shape asks for 3 different arguments. It asks for the amount of sides that you want, how big the radius is, and then how smooth do you want your sides, okay? So let's see what that looks like. So shape. So say I wanted a square, 4 sides, and I want it to be sort of medium size. I'll show you what that looks like, but I'm gonna put 0.5 because I just know that that's a medium size. And then shading, I'm gonna put 1. I'll sort of show you what something less than 1 looks like. But 1 is just really clear lines. So I'm gonna send that out. No, I'm wrong, sorry. 0 is very clear lines. Okay. So here I just have a white rectangle, yeah? So clear enough, this is what 0.5 scale looks like. If I was to raise this to 1, I could just show you it's much bigger. And in fact, 1 as a scale just fills the entire screen. So that's just something for you to know. If I was changing this to a triangle, you can sort of see it's still quite large, right? So that's why I did 0.5, because I knew that was going to be something more palpable. So if you wanted to make this, I'm going to even make this a little smaller actually. If I wanted to even make this a circle, I would still have to put sides, and I know circles don't really have sides, but look what happens if you put 100 sides. It basically becomes a circle, and even more if I was to do like 1,000, right? I mean, you can still see sort of the pixels up here, but it really is trying its best. Now it has 1,000 sides, so it basically is doing the equivalent of an oval. Now the unfortunate thing is, for this, it sort of squeezes things, or sort of stretches them out really, so it really looks like an oval, but that's just something that's built into Hydra, unfortunately. Okay, if I wanted to change the scale of that, I could do that here. And let me show you a bit now of the sort of blending. So this is basically how much the shape blends with the background. So if I was to do 0.5, you would see that it's blending quite a bit now. And it's actually getting bigger because it's just blending so much, right? So if I even did 0.9, it's doing quite a bit of it. And 1 is even more, okay? So that's shape. Next, we're gonna do noise. So this is noise. Noise is this. And it basically is almost the equivalent of that sort of television noise you see sort of after a TV program. Yeah, so the two arguments for noise are scale and offset. And it is true that offset is a little bit more complicated, but I honestly just think of offset here as speed. So you can think of it either way. I just tend to think of it as speed. So let's do noise. The first is scale. Scale is basically how big the noise is. So if I have 10, let's just do 10 for now. And let's do offset at 0.2 just to get us started. Okay, so here you can see the noise. This is sort of a speed or offset at 0.2. If we make it a little faster, you could see that it just increases speed, increases its offset. And if I do 10, it's quite a bit more. So let's just keep it sort of at 1 actually. Now, if I was to increase this, you would see you get a bunch more of it, and you can even get to the level of like the television noise. If I were to do something like this, right? Yeah, so it really, this is the thing you look for television. Now you can really see that happen, right? Okay. So now let's do Voronoi. Voronoi is actually similar to noise, but Voronoi actually has a bit more geometric shapes. It's a little bit more organized. So Voronoi asks for 3 things. It asks for scale, speed, and blending. So it's almost the same as shape, but it doesn't ask for sides, and there's a speed element here as well. So let's do Voronoi. So, okay, first of all, I'm gonna trash this. It's driving me crazy. So we have Voronoi. Let's do 20. And this is sort of how many shapes are on the screen again. Next is scale. So let's do 0.5. Blending, let's just do 0 for now so we can see everything. Right, so this is what Voronoi looks like. Looks like, I always like to think of it as rocks because all of the shades are so different, which I really like about it. Now, we can do something really cool here. We can actually sort of make something like stars. And because the shade thing looks different than the shapes, which is quite cool. So if I were to make this last element 0.5, you can start to see the middles sort of stay the same brightness, but the sides start to shade out, start to become quite dark. So if I were to do 0.9, you could see that how even more dramatic that is, right? If I was to bring that to 1, and then to 2, and to 3, they almost look like like fireflies or something. So let's bring this to like 10. And now they even look like stars. And if I increase it to 200, now it really looks like stars or something like that, right? And if I increase that to that, they even look faster. So that's just something cool that you can do right off the bat with Voronoi, right? Okay. And then there's 2 left for sources. The first is OSC. So OSC is sort of a wave, and I actually tend to use this one the most because it has both geometric elements and it also inherently has color. So OSC, we didn't look at it yet. Sorry, my bad. So OSC asks for 3 things. It asks for frequency, sync, and offset. These 2 things actually go hand in hand. Sync is really speed. Frequency is really has to do with how many lines pass a point for a certain amount of time. So frequency really can go hand in hand with how many lines do you want to see, right? So, and then offset, you can think of it as offset, and there's something going on with sort of the color not aligning, but really what offset is how much color you're adding, right? So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to do OSC, let's keep the frequency at 20, and then sync at 0.5, and then we can add a 1 and this is going to bring us sort of like a colorful wave, just like that, right? Yeah, so this right here, I just am really thinking about the speed, right? This is the speed. And if I was to make this into 100, you can see that now there's much more lines. If I even do 1,000, there's a lot more. So let's just keep this at 1,000. Sync. Now it's going much slower. And if I made this one 0, you just get black and white, right? So I like to keep this at 1 because it lets me play with color a little bit more, right? And then the last thing we'll talk about is source. Now, source is a little confusing, okay? Because as you see when I click on it, it's just the exact same thing. But that's actually what source is meant to do. It basically is meant to sort of take something that you've already done and let it work as like a placeholder. So for example, I have this right here. And this is maybe going a step ahead, but I'm just going to do it now. So out has always just automatically default. You didn't need to put anything because there's only this on the page. There's only this code. So it just outs it automatically. But I could also just do something like this, right? So this basically, this O is shorthand for out, and then I can put a number sort of assigning it as some sort of output. So this also works, right? So if I enter that, it does the exact same thing, right? I could also, and also I should say, actually, this happens in the background. So render O0, this actually happens always in the background, right? So it automatically is doing that. If I enter sort of the whole page, it automatically is doing that. Nothing changes at all. But what I also could do is I have this sort of output. I could also use this as an input. So say I wanted to do that. How would I do that? I would use source, right? I'm using it as another source, and I'm going to use that as an input now. I'm going to use that as a new way to put it in. Think of it almost as like a snake. Like this is going out, and then it's coming back into here, right? So I could have it repeat maybe. I could modulate the hue. I don't know. And then I could kaleidoscope it. And then I could have that go out to O1, so out 1. And then I could render out 1. And then take a look at what happens. Right? So now I'm using this as an input and then this as an output. So look what happens if I change it back to O0. Right? Goes right back to the first one. And then it goes to this second part of the code, right? So that's what basically source is for. It lets you do sort of these feedback loops, which is really, really quite cool. All right. So now let's talk about how to manipulate using color, okay? And I just want to see how long I've been on here for. Okay. Cool. So let's just trash this. Let's go back to shape. Let's do sort of a triangle. Let's have it be sort of medium size. And let's just have it be regular for now. So out, boom. Okay. Or actually, okay, that's a little bit. Let's do, yeah, that's good. Okay, now let's start adding some stuff to this and making it a little bit more interesting, okay? We're gonna start with different ways to change the color, okay? So let's go to color. First, color. So color asks for RGBA. It basically is like the solid source, this one, right? But basically it's changing the color of the source. So I have this shape, and then I wanted to add color. So in a line of code for Hydra, how you separate things from each other is you'll always start with a source, right? So everything I just taught you, you'll always start with one of those. And then the modifiers, you'll sort of add to one another by adding a dot. So what I'll do is I'll type a dot and then color, and then I'll have the sort of information, and then a dot, and then another modifier or another modifier, and then dot out. Okay, and that's always the sort of structure of this code. Okay, so for now, let's do a green triangle. Okay, so this is green, RGB, so it should give us a green triangle. Yep. Okay, so that's just one thing you can do. You can sort of play around. I don't know. So it's sort of a dark green triangle. Maybe add, right? So more blue now. So so that's color. Pretty self-explanatory, yeah. Okay, I'm gonna keep color there because now I'll show you hue while I have some color. And basically what hue does is it just, if you think of sort of the color wheel, basically what hue is sort of offsets it by a certain amount. So I'll show you what that looks like, and because I know it's a little confusing. So, okay, I have hue, and then maybe I'll put this for now, okay, right? So it just changes the hue slightly. And you could do that with color as well, but it's much simpler because it's just one number, and eventually you could actually do something here. I'll just do this quickly because it's sort of irrelevant to now. You could do this and actually change the color over time. And that's nice because it's not just changing one of the RGB values, but it's just changing the hue. So it's much nicer actually as sort of an equation because it's not just changing one of these, and it's keeping this ratio, right? So I'm gonna take that out for now. That's hue. That's how you manipulate with hue, okay? Brightness. Brightness is pretty self-explanatory. If you increase it, you make it brighter. If you make it less, you make it darker, okay? So I'll just show you what that looks like. Brightness. Let's do, I don't know, 0.2, okay? So everything's a little brighter. 0 is sort of regular, right? If I made it 1, everything is very, very bright, so it goes on a scale from 0 to 1. Okay, and you could even see if I do a negative, right? You can see it sort of increase. So you get the idea. That's brightness. It's sort of self-explanatory as well. Contrast. Contrast is basically taking the extremes of the light portions and the darker portions and making them more extreme. And so for that, I sort of need something else. I'm gonna do maybe I'll do what they did. I'll do OSC, I'll do that, and that. I'll out it. Okay, let's make this 20 or 15 maybe. So contrast, if I have that, and I do 0.5. Oh, I have two ends. So you see when I 0.5 it, the black and the whites come closer and closer together. So if I make that even less, it's almost gray, right? And that's because it's under 1. So if it's just 1, that's regular. But if I make it higher than 1, you see how now it's pretty extreme, right? So 1 is normal, and then if I increase it past 1, it gets way more severe, right? So that's contrast. And then saturate will be our last one for color for today. And for that, I'm going to add some color to our little OSC mobile. Okay, there's some color for you, with some contrast for sure. And let's get rid of that. Let's change to saturate. So saturate is also sort of an amount one, just like brightness and contrast. Saturate basically makes the colors more vivid. So if I were to bring it down close to 0, you see how these are pretty black and white now, right? So if I bring it to 1, bring this back to 1, you'll see it's normal. But if I bring this up to, say, like something extreme like 10, you can see sort of clearly the different colors of the color wheel now sort of laid horizontally to one another. So that's what saturate does, is it makes those colors more prominent next to one another. So 3, it's a little bit less like that. Okay, and that's it for color. Now we'll talk just because we are running out of time here, I'll talk quickly about geometry now. Okay, so geometry, we're going to talk about 5 different ways of doing geometry today, and then I'll sort of show you how these things sort of work in combination. So first, let's talk, I'm actually going to keep this up. I'm going to actually keep that, and let's bring this out a little bit. Okay, let's do that. Okay, let's do that. Okay, so first, let's talk about scale. Scale is self-explanatory, but it's a little complicated. So let's just talk about it for a moment. This is scale. So scale has a lot of different things it asks for. First, it asks for amounts, and then it has all these crazy things. So first of all, if you just want to change the size of it, you can just think about the first one, okay? And also, if you enter only one value, it'll always go in order. So if you put 2 values in the arguments, it'll always just go these 2, and you'll need to enter more values if you want to get all the values in, okay? So with that being said, say I wanted to change the scale of this, which you don't really need to, because you can sort of change the scale right here. But say you did want to change the scale, and I wanted to change it to, I don't know, I wanted to zoom out, okay? So less than 1 zooms out, more than 1 zooms in, okay? So 0.2 zooms us pretty way out, and if I were to zoom in, this is what would happen if I were to pick something like 2, zooms me way in, right? So let's just go back to 1. Now, the next 2 values, x mult and y mult. These are just weird ways of saying you can stretch it. So say I wanted to stretch the sort of, I wanted to stretch it horizontally, you know? So I wanted to basically make all of these little lines way wider than they are. That would be an x, and actually I should have done this. I'm gonna change this. It's easier to see when it's a shape. Let's do that. Oops. Okay, so we have our square. Say I wanted to make the rectangle wider, right? What I could do is I could, well, this actually might squish it. Yep, that squished it. Okay, so that would be this value right here. That's the x mult. And basically x does stuff on sort of the x-axis. So if you think about, think about math in your classes, you can think about the x and y axis, and this stretches it along the x-axis. Okay, so you can see now it is not as much. Okay, now let's just go back to 1. Now say I wanted to do the exact same on the y-axis. I wanted to stretch it vertically. That would be the next one. So you can see here, I'm stretching it on the y-axis. Now it looks more like a square, actually. So if you wanted to actually do that for a circle, this is how you would do it. Now I have more of a circle here, right? So that sort of solves our issue from earlier. Okay, so that's that. And then the next two are sort of offset. This just means positions. So say I wanted to I wanted to move the square around. So the first one is x-axis, okay? So basically what I would do is, oh, yes, that's right. I understand, right. So first of all, it's offset, but think of it like this. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm being confusing here. If you are in a room, but you are the size of the room, you can't really move around. That's what's going on here, right? So if I'm half the size of the room, say like that, okay? Say I'm half the size of the room. Now I have to move some places to move around. So now I can move a little bit on the x-axis, like that, you can see. So that moved me to the right, and then I could also move to the left, just like that. But if I am the size of the room, so if I am so that's just what 1 is. And if I'm on the size of the room, I can't actually move around. So you'll see that that 0.2 on the offset doesn't really do anything. It's just the same place. So if you want to move the position, you have to change the scale. Okay, so 0.2 I can move now. This will actually move me off quite far. So now you can see that, okay? And then you could also do that with the y-axis, which is that, okay? Does that make sense? Great. So that scale. Now we can talk about rotates. Okay, and I'm going to bring back OSC for this. 2. Okay, so I have that. Rotate is pretty self-explanatory. Rotate acts for angle and speed. So I could certainly ask for that. So here you can see it's rotating at a certain angle over a certain amount of time. So this is the speed, right? I wanted to make. Okay, if I wanted to make it faster, you see it's quite quick now. Okay. Cool. So that's rotate. Now, repeat sounds what it is. It basically repeats over a certain amount of time. You could use these offsets. I tend not to. And there's also repeat X and repeat Y, but I just tend to use repeat because it encompasses both, okay? So let's say I wanted, okay, also this is sort of dizzying, so I'm gonna make this a little less. That's right, I have. Okay, so say I wanted to repeat this sort of 2 horizontally and then 2 vertically. I would do something like this. Now you can see it repeats 2 up here, 2 down here. It kind of looks cool. And say I wanted to offset it a little bit. You could actually see that down here, the things moved over a little bit. So you can see that over there, right? And you could also do that for sorry. And now you can see that it did it vertically as well. So now I have these cool sort of geometric shapes going on. And if I do 3 and 3, you can sort of get even more of these cool geometric designs going. So repeat's pretty cool, I would have to say. All right, so that's repeat. I'm gonna show you 2 more things. Pixelates. You can get really cool sort of retro effects with Pixelate. It does what it says, it pixelates the screen. So say, let's try like 100. So I could show you this. But pixelate, basically, you can pixelate how many you want on the x-axis, on the y-axis. So if I do 100, you can sort of see it's a little pixelated here. And if I could even make it even more, so if I were to decrease the number, now you can see it's quite pixelated here. And you can play around with the sort of geometry of the pixels. So you can see here the pixels are sort of rectangle shapes because they're sort of there's more on the x-axis than there are on the y-axis, and I could even make that a bit more severe. So yeah, you can really see how rectangular the pixels are now, which is really quite cool. And the last thing I'll show you is kaleidoscope. So kaleidoscope is really simple. All it asks for is how many sides you want reflected, n sides, right? So let's say I have my OSC rotating thing. Kaleidoscope, you can choose how many ways it's reflected. So say I want it reflected 3 ways. You can sort of see on the center point, there is sort of a reflection happening on this side, and on this side. I could change that to 4. And you can now see it's almost like a square formation reflecting on 4 sides. Could you increase it to 5, and then 6. And then I could even make it really high and make it almost look like a circle, right? So this is a really great tool. It really makes things, you can sort of do a lot with this. It always looks really fantastic. And those are the things I'm going to teach you today. And I just wanted to show you in combination what these things can really, really look like. So if I wanted to, say I wanted to, I have this thing, I wanted to repeat it. Let's do like 3 and 3 times. Okay. So I could do, and remember, put your dots between your modifiers. I have that. I could even sort of choose to offset it a bit. Remember, those are offsets. And now I have all these cool sort of functions going on. I could even pixelate it, right? So let me pixelate it like 100, and then maybe like 90. That's kind of cool. See, they're pixelated there right now. And then maybe I could rotate this whole thing somewhat slowly. You can see now it's just rotating somewhat slowly. I could sort of change the hue of everything. Okay. That looks pretty crazy, I have to say. I could increase the contrast. Now the contrast is increased. Let's actually make it way more. Let's make it like something like 3. Yeah, wow, that's now pretty large. And I'll teach you how to do this next time, but say I wanted to sort of change it over time. I can do this little equation right here, which basically, it's basically a wave. It lets me change things over time, and I'll teach you how to do that next time. But say I wanted to do something like that. And now you can see it's changing pretty quickly, the hue, just changing sort of all the time. So that's a really cool thing you can do. And all this you can do with things that you actually learned today, which is really kind of amazing that you can do that. And say I wanted to take this and make a kaleidoscope even. So all of this, I want to make a kaleidoscope. I could certainly do that. And this is what it would look like. Yeah. And you could take stuff out as you go along. Say you don't want the pixelate stuff anymore. Take it out, and then you could re-put it in. Now there's no more pixelation. Okay. And what I'll show you next time is what I call feedback loop. And basically what you can do, remember that this sort of defaults to out 0. I could do some feedback loops. So here I'm going to modulate it, and I'll tell you what modulate means next time with this output. And look what happens when I do that. Yeah? So now it's doing some crazy, crazy stuff. And I'll teach you how to do this next time. Thanks so much for watching the workshop. I hope you got a lot out of it. Please email me if you have any questions. I'm here to answer them, and I'm looking forward to part 2. Thanks for stopping by. Bye.